Danny.
Hello.
Vicki and I are so delighted to see you
I'm excited to be here too in my garage. Yeah.
in your garage, which makes it, that's the first for us. In 100 episodes, we've never had anybody in a garage. So this is cool on many
Yeah.
levels.
I'm
Yeah,
glad to be
actually.
breaking new ground. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I think about it, right, Danny is trusting us. This might make for like a quick getaway plan. So if we hear the garage door go up, like we'll talk fast, right?
I'll
Yeah.
back out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Danny, you describe yourself as an author, artist, and tea drinker. You've written more than 15 books and you've contributed to many more. So, could you tell us about your past? What's your story?
Yeah. So I spent 30 years working in advertising. I was a creative director in several different New York ad agencies, and I was a copywriter as well. So I was in the creative field, but I didn't really make art, and I kind of found my way into making art, and eventually it became something that interested me so much that I left my job in advertising and
Mhm,
started to teach people online about making art.
mhm,
And I've always been a writer since I was a little kid, so that's very much what I think of primarily as my identity.
mhm,
And I've written books primarily about art making, but also about just the issues that creative people have,
mhm.
you know, and we all seem to have similar ones when it comes to, you know, the things that stop us and
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
things we tell ourselves about making art. So that's kind of what's interested me is
yeah.
to help people through that.
Hmm.
Well, I just finished Art Before Breakfast, and it to me it read a lot like a philosophy book. I don't tend to do art before breakfast, but I meditate before breakfast. And that was something that you said that didn't stick for you, but it's the same idea of doing something before you dig into the noisiness.
Right. I think going back to the artist's way, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you guys are familiar with that, Julia
Hmm.
Cameron's book,
Right?
the idea that when you wake up, your mind hasn't been filled yet.
Hmm.
And also, I think that the idea of being empty that way, but also not that this is time for yourselves. We
Hmm.
that I think the thing that I hear from people the most is where do you find time to make art?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
just one day I'll take a workshop. I'll go away for the weekend. I'll
Hmm.
retire. I'll whatever it is.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
always a reason to not do it now.
Yeah.
And and for me it's like if you don't really need more than 15 or 20 minutes
Hmm.
to do this. And that is comparable to meditation, to yoga, to
Hmm.
whatever it is, the things that we have as part of our morning ritual. So why not make art part of it?
Hmm.
And then I think it'll make your whole day better.
Yeah. Reminds me
Yeah.
of a quote: "Someday is not a day of the week."
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So,
You touched on, I was going to pick up on that when you in your Friday Danny's essays, and we'll link this information for viewers and
mhm,
listeners. You said, I think this was on March 14th, whatever you decide to do, make it fun, suspend judgment. Lord, that's hard. Relax, and just think of it as dirtying some pages. I've heard that before, but that's one of those things that just bears repetition over and over again. And
mhm,
you put such a fun spin on that. That I think it's a little liberating, and people need that because, some of us can have really good intentions, but we'll talk a little bit about the inner critic too. But the critic's voices are so loud
mhm.
sometimes that even though you want to carve out those few minutes, it gets swept up with everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's another benefit of first thing in the morning is your inner critic tends to get up later, I find. So, right. So I think,
Right.
and,
Yes.
but I do think, and as you said, we'll talk about this some more, but I think being able to say, yes, I'll need to assess what I'm doing. I'll need to judge this, but
Hmm.
maybe I can wait a bit to do that. Maybe I could just
Hmm.
have 15
Yeah.
or 20 minutes to just screw around, play, do some stuff, and then later on we can decide whether it was a waste of time. But
Yeah.
let's try not doing it at the same time that we're trying to make something.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Because you
Totally.
can't write and edit at the same time. I mean, You
Right.
can, but it'll slow down your whole getting it on the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're pushing the accelerator and the brake at the same time to
Right.
continue the garage metaphor. That you're trying to go, but you're also trying to sort of you're just doing too many things at once.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it takes different parts of your brain to
Hmm.
create versus to assess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So keep them distinct, and that's something that I
Yeah.
wrestle with all the time too. But
Yeah.
it is a goal that I think is important to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that I love from you is the drama of the creative process takes a while to unwind and calm down. All that adrenaline
Hmm.
needs to be flushed from the system. The paint takes time to dry and reach its true hue.
Who
I
said I
love
said
that.
that? Okay.
You
Yeah.
did. You said that.
Brilliant.
I know. It's so good.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the art of sort of pottery where you paint a color and it doesn't reach that color until it's fired.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, I think I was watching, I've become sort of obsessed with Portrait Artist of the Year. Have you guys ever watched the show? It's a
Mhm.
British TV show on Sky TV. They've been doing it for about 8 or 9 years. And what they do is they travel around the country. They set up it's kind of like the British baking show, if you've ever seen that
Oh,
show.
of course. Yeah.
But it's for painters. So what they do is they bring in three celebrities each week, and then they have a bunch of artists who each paint each of them, and it's really worth looking at it. A lot of it's on YouTube. You can find it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was watching a show this weekend, and they were showing how some of these artists use mirrors to look at their art with. So you hold up a mirror, and you might look at it a mirror that makes things upside down, or a mirror that makes things smaller, and it's just another perspective, another fresh look at what you're doing. So you can be looking at your art and be absolutely sure about X, Y, or Z about this particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look in the mirror and you have a whole new perspective, and you realize
Mhm.
that what you were sure was right
Hmm.
was just one point of view, and that you can look at it again. And I think that's something that is really helpful to remember, which is your inner critic, your assessment is no more correct than you are,
Mhm.
and that there's lots of different ways of looking at it. So,
Mhm.
don't immediately default to, oh, I'm an idiot, I didn't see that, or I didn't do it
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
But instead to say, you know, yeah, that could be right, but maybe not.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that idea of not truncating the process. I think for me, very often when I'm doing something creative, I have a vision in my head, even if I don't want to acknowledge it, of what the goal is or what the outcome is. And often it's emulating something else that I like. And I think what you just said, Danny, is when we get in our own way, when we're looking at what we're
Mhm.
creating, when it's in progress, in process, and it doesn't meet those, whatever those hallmarks are. Um, but got to like shake that out of your system.
Yeah, and I think, like, how interesting is it to have a very clear idea of what you want to make and then to make it? It's sort of interesting, but I think more interesting is to have an itch and a kind of general sense
Yeah.
of, I want to make something and let's see what happens, and then to go on a little adventure and to come to this new place. I think
Yeah.
it's like doing a jigsaw. Like, there's the picture on the cover of the box. You put all the pieces together, you end up with a jigsaw. Okay, that's a way of spending your time. But
Hmm.
how much more interesting is it to have a blank piece of paper, to not
Mhm.
be sure what's going to happen on it,
Mhm.
and then to just start playing around and see what emerges? And that also means that you don't have to make your assessment about whether or not, deep into the process, you've successfully done what you told yourself at the beginning you were supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And I think that that's something that we struggle with a lot, which is like, oh, didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean it's a failure. I mean, your failure might have been your initial assessment. Your
Mhm.
initial goal might be the failure, as opposed to where you ended up. And I think it's like when you think about adventure stories, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and you think about people setting out and not knowing where exactly they're going to go, having a vague sense of a goal, but having all kinds of adventures along the way. That's what makes for a great story, as
Yeah.
opposed to Bilbo, takes the ring, throws it at the volcano, and book's over.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so, and it's, it's follows so much of the writing advice, which is
Yeah.
you write to know what you think.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things, the form of drawing that I find the most rewarding, the one that's pushed me the furthest, is illustrated journaling. So
Mm,
what that means is that you're keeping a diary that is words and pictures, and um, it's you could think of it as like a scrapbook. You could think of it as a blog, but basically, it's this combination of seeing your experiences, your day, through words and through pictures.
mhm,
And so you set out and you say, okay, what did I do today? Um, like I think about when I did my illustrated journal yesterday. We did several things. We went to the paint store. It was my sister-in-law's birthday, and my wife made some crab risotto. So
Mm.
not a terribly exciting day. It wouldn't make a great movie, but it made a good spread in my journal because I did one thing that was about picking paint colors and what that's about. And I
mhm,
did another thing that was about drawing a crab. And then I did a drawing of my sister-in-law blowing out the candles on the
mm,
cake. And I wrote about all these different experiences. So I didn't quite know what I was going to make when I sat down to do it. I just had a general sense of like, these are the things I did today. How can I depict them in an interesting way? How can I have fun making this stuff? And
Yeah.
then I ended up, spending some time doing some drawing and some painting and some writing. And, I was really happy at the end of it. I was like, wow, I didn't
mm,
have any idea, even when I was in the middle of it, what it would look like. And again, not huge stakes. It's just a page in my journal, but an opportunity for experimentation, discovery, play, adventure. That's
right,
way more fun than if I was like, okay, I know exactly what this is going to be like. Let me just make
right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a great way to solidify the memories.
Right.
Absolutely, because you're contemplating it, you're meditating on it, you're thinking about it.
Mhm,
And, I have journal pages from 20 years ago that I can look at and immediately be back in that day
mhm, mhm,
and
Mm.
remember something as mundane as picking paint chips, but
mhm,
it's just much more rich and alive, and that day stands out from the day before and the day
mhm,
after that I did something equally not that
mhm,
incredibly exciting, but still just that's what life is.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
All of that comes across, so much. One of the things we wanted to touch on, although this is only, can you guys see that okay?
mhm.
I'd rather you look at that than me, your book and me. But in the 15 books that you've written, we were talking before Wynne hit record. This is the one that really jumped out at me. And I told Wynne the other day, one of the things I appreciate about it, and I know folks won't be able to entirely see this, but as you put this book together, and maybe this is how you approach, all the others too, it very much reflects for me, Danny, what you just described about that combination of where's the visual
Mhm,
and where's the storytelling to go with it. And just, I mean, it's such a rich and wonderful book visually, but the way you use, your drawings and illustrations to highlight specific points, it really is unique in that way and super impactful. And I've got so many pages dog-eared that, really stood out to me. But I think that approach of combining those two parts of you
Mhm.
creates really wonderful things for your readers.
Yeah, I mean, it may go back to my days in advertising. When you make a print ad, you think in terms of the words and the pictures together. In fact,
Yeah.
typically in advertising, there are two creative people who work together on an ad. One of them is sort of more or less in charge of the visual, the other's in charge of the words, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
cross pollination too. But
Yeah.
that to me has always been, that's the way to communicate ideas is, and it goes back to when I was a kid and I loved, illustrated books. Kids' books are always, so rich in their visual part of it, and then the story, they're so interactive, right? Because
mhm,
people are reading them
Yeah.
aloud to you and you read them over and over again, all those kinds of things. That reading experience to me is really so wonderful. And I think when it comes to learning ideas, that's really important. A lot of the books that I write, are not really intended for you to sit down at the beginning and read it cover to cover.
Mm-hmm.
They're more, because that's not even really how I write them. I tend to write them in terms of here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. Maybe let's summarize the whole bunch of ideas we just encountered. But a lot of times that's how I like to read a book of advice, is to
Mm-hmm.
kind of dip into it here and there. And, it's not, you're getting ideas all the way through it. You don't have to have read the whole book to get the point. And I think the visuals help to do that too. It's just, to me, a natural kind of way of communicating, and as you say, of thinking through ideas, is to do it with words and pictures, even if it's doodling or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You don't have to be one or the other.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I
and
love
you
that.
do that so well.
Yeah.
So well.
And I
Mm-hmm.
love that you have a shirt that
Thank
says
you.
create every day because you talk about
Thank you.
creating a make building it in as a regular cadence.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is, as you mentioned, Julia Cameras, write 3 pages every morning or draw in your journal or that type of daily cadence. And one of the statements that you've made about that is things will happen you can't possibly predict.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like almost like a chemical process. What happens
Mm-hmm.
when you're having ideas, right? When you're thinking about them. That's, to me, so much what the fun of it is. But
Mm-hmm.
creativity is ultimately about combining stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a lifetime of experiences as human beings. We also take in all this material all the time, looking at pictures, watching videos, reading books. And it's all, I like to think of it as a big cauldron of stew or soup that is always being added to. And as all these ingredients are dumped into this cauldron, they're interacting with each other. They're breaking down, the spices are being added, new chemical things are happening. That's what's such a cool part of being a creative person, is
Mm-hmm.
that you are at the you're the source of all these changes and combinations, and that's where the new stuff comes about. It's Nothing is original in the sense that all of the ingredients pre-exist your process,
Mm-hmm.
but the outcome is original.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. There's a part of Shut Your Monkey that I wanted to call out to you about change. It's on page 68. And I think, sometimes what you just described about the soup, the creativity and the combinations of things can be a little overwhelming. But I also think, you do such a good job of reminding people that life is super fluid and just hop on, pick a spot, but
Mm-hmm.
jump in because it's all going to change. But you wrote, while we were all tinkering with the latest gizmos, few saw this. You're talking about your career in advertising. Few saw the real sea change approaching, that the whole business of making TV commercials would eventually end up in hospice, undone by social marketing and YouTube and tweets. Skills that people had been polishing since the Korean War were suddenly little help. Mad men sobbed into their martinis. And then you offer, some wonderful tips about, how to kind of deal with change and hop on and write it out as opposed to retreating. And it's super encouraging. But I think what you bring from the world of advertising forward is such a compelling crossover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, look at the time. I mean, I wrote that book quite a while ago, and certainly before AI. And now we think about,
2016, I think. Yeah,
was it? Yeah.
I
But
think so.
you know, the, I mean, the effect that artificial intelligence is having on all those creative jobs now is so
Right.
much more profound than what I had imagined.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but to me, that's such an important aspect of our creativity, is that it is this tool for our lives to help us deal with
Hmm.
the inevitable change that's going to happen in the
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
world, in our own circumstances. And being a creative person means that rather than being locked into one way of doing things, your whole existence is about coming up with new ideas and taking whatever's happening and coming up with new versions of that.
Right.
And so if you get frozen and calcified and blocked, what you're really doing is you're not allowing this incredible tool you have to be used for your own life, to make
Mm-hmm.
your own life better,
Yeah.
by just being free and not, and a lot of times the commercialization of creativity requires consistent and predictable outcomes. What I mean by that is if you're an professional illustrator, you're expected to produce things in a certain style, with a certain look.
Mhm.
And you as an artist, I know a lot of illustrators, and some of them don't necessarily, they feel locked in by their style, but that's what they're selling, right? Because you need to be able to present your style and say, these are the kinds of illustrations I make. And then I give you an assignment, and then I'm expecting that you're not going to reinvent the wheel, but you're going to deliver that consistent look.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to be completely, it doesn't mean that you can't be flexible. It doesn't mean that you can't have variations. And now more and more that's, because otherwise, a robot could be trained with your style.
Right.
And then you've lost control of the situation. Yeah. So I think if you think of yourself as an inventor of new things in every aspect of your life, it always surprises me when creative people find a uniform. You see this in fashion a lot, where fashion, and particularly male fashion designers, wear uniforms. They dress the same. Like when you see Ralph Lauren, he's always wearing the same thing, right?
Denim shirt.
Right, exactly. Denim shirt. When you see, and this is true across so many designers. I remember I once wrote down a list of all of them, and they were so consistent. I thought your whole job is like being creative and offering new fashion every season. Why do you always wear the same thing? What's that about?
Yeah.
And I think like, can we be that way? Or are we locked into this commercial thing where it's like with an actor, and actors are expected to play certain kinds of roles. And I always admire the actors who suddenly do something completely different.
Right.
I was just watching a TV show of 1950s French detective called Maigret, and it stars Rowan Atkinson, who used to be Mr. Bean. Remember Mr. Bean, right? Completely crazy comedy. Now he's playing dead serious film noir. And I thought, I admire that. Like he's not locked into it. And that I think is something that we all want to be. Just otherwise it's boring. It just becomes a job.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to need to check that out. With the last name of Atkinson by marriage, Rowan Atkinson is like, he's it. That's all there is, right? Yeah.
Your famous relative.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I love the embrace change, Danny Gregory philosophy. And we know you have a school, sketchbook school. What else is on your radar?
I do a lot of stuff on YouTube now because I've found that YouTube is, to me, a better way of reaching people than books are, frankly. Because we have over 400,000 subscribers to our channel now. So I can make a video and reach lots of people in a way that even a book can't anymore. So I find that, I continue to want to encourage people to draw, not just because they can then become people who draw, but because it's an opportunity to push yourself into doing something that you're afraid of or that you don't feel like you know how to do. And that drawing, it seems like just about any kind of activity, drawing is a thing that everybody says, I wish I could draw. Everybody wishes they could draw. And I always say, well, then start drawing. When you were 7, you did it without wishing endlessly about it. So just start doing it. And guess what? You're going to do it badly.
Yes.
That's fine. You've never done it. You haven't done it since you were 7.
Right.
So you're probably going to do it badly. Suck it up and do it anyway. It's okay to do things badly when we're starting out. And then what I try to do is to talk about what does badly really mean when it comes to a creative act? What does it mean to do it badly? Well, it goes back to what we were talking about before, where you start out with this preconception of, I want to be able to draw my dog. And then I do a drawing of it, and it's like, oh, it doesn't really look like my dog, so therefore I failed. And so you can look at that 2 ways. You can say, well, maybe if I draw my dog every day for a month, I'll be able to draw him. Or why did I draw it badly? Like, what does that mean exactly? When I look at this drawing, not only does it not look like the photo of him, but is that a bad thing? I could just take a photo of him. So why do I need a drawing that looks like a photo of him? But maybe what I drew is a love poem
Hmm.
of how I love my dog. And the fact that his eyes are too big is because I love to look into his eyes.
Hmm.
Or the fact that his legs are too short is because I'm always helping him up onto the couch. So, you know, you're telling a
Yeah.
story by your ineptness in a way,
Hmm.
and you're
Yeah.
Hmm.
showing what it is that you prioritized, and that's telling something. So rather than it being a pass fail situation where you go, ugh, I suck, instead you look at it and say, let me try and understand what it exactly happened here. And the next time I do it, I'll probably make other kinds of mistakes, but maybe I
Hmm.
won't make those mistakes again. And if I
Yeah.
keep eliminating mistakes, guess what? I'm learning something each
Hmm.
time. And then what drawing well means is getting the results that I wanted, having some
Hmm.
control over the outcome rather than just
Hmm.
blundering into it and going, ugh, there's 100 things that were wrong here. I don't know how to fix any of
Right.
them.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, this is how you figure it out. And it's the same as when you learn to walk.
Hmm.
You fell down a lot, and that's just part of what you have to do
Yeah.
to internalize these things. So I find that talking about that on YouTube is kind of like an endless thing.
Hmm.
There's so many ways of talking about it. And to me, it's just about something bigger than learning to draw.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about getting confidence and control over your life, taking risks, having adventures, all the kinds of things that make life more interesting,
Hmm.
not just can I draw,
Hmm.
Right. And there's
exactly.
I think an intimate quality to that. As you described, the creation of something and, the critics, we kind of like bolster ourselves through the
Yeah.
people that are going to look over our shoulders and go, this doesn't look like that, whatever the subject is.
Right.
And I think, especially for me in the age of AI, reminding ourselves that we can create, this is the
Hmm.
right time for that message, that it
Hmm.
is possible to do that. And then what you just said, Danny, which I love, the storytelling about the drawing,
Yeah.
and its oddities or peculiarities or how it relates to the subject or doesn't, that makes it a full picture, literally.
Right. Yeah. Because I think if you sit down and you do a drawing, use that same pen to write something
Hmm.
next to that
Yeah.
drawing. And
Yeah.
you can write, oh, this sucks. I'm no good. And you can go into a whole thing like that. Or you can analyze it a bit, or you can talk about what were the things that were going on in your mind while you're doing it. Because
Yeah.
chances are, part of the reason that you didn't get the result that you wanted is because you weren't really fully concentrating. You weren't in the flow.
Hmm.
And when you get into a flow state, you tend not to be self-critical because you're moving forward and you're creating and you're making. But if you
Yeah.
keep stopping to assess what you're doing, that breaks down the process, and then you don't
Hmm.
draw as well. So
Right.
criticizing yourself actually does the opposite of what you think. It's not going to make you draw better by pointing out your faults. It's going to distract you
Right.
and
Hmm.
divert you from the concentration that you need to get into that place
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
your observations turn into lines, because
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing if you think about it, that you have your eyeballs making these little tiny movements that they make as they're focusing and moving along the contours of the thing that you're drawing, and that information goes through your neurons in your head and ultimately translates into motions in the muscles, the tiny
Hmm.
muscles in your fingers to move a pen. That's
Yeah.
an incredible thing that's going
Yeah.
on.
Hmm.
And again, it's like if you imagine like somebody was doing surgery and they had I call it a monkey sitting on their shoulder, constantly telling them that they
Hmm.
were doing it wrong. That probably wouldn't be the surgeon that you'd want to have operating on you, right?
No.
So, but in a lot of ways, this is a similarly kind of precise behavior. And if you're distracting somebody from it constantly while they're doing it, you're not going to get the same results. So that's why I like to tell people, just
Yeah.
wait later on. We'll talk about later on whether it's any good. But
Yeah.
now, like, try and get into this flow state of, of of focused creation,
Hmm.
and I think you'll be happier with what you're doing. And that takes practice. Just getting into that state takes
Hmm.
practice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think I find on YouTube, a lot of people come upon my videos on YouTube because they want to watch a video to teach them to draw.
Hmm.
I should sit down and find a video on YouTube that'll teach me how to draw my dog. And so they'll type in how to draw your dog. And then sometimes they'll find one of my videos in which I say to them, yeah, that's that's not going to happen. You're not going to find a video that's going to teach you how to draw your
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah.
It's not really how it
Yeah.
works. And it's okay. It's okay that you aren't going to get that immediate gratification, because really, why should you? Like
Yeah.
we think of YouTube and Google as an opportunity to learn stuff and to get answers, but there's some things that the answers aren't that simple. And when it comes to drawing,
Yeah.
there certainly are techniques that people have taught. Draw an egg shape and then cut it in half, and then draw lines at this angle and use perspective vanishing points. There are things that appear to be a set of rules and steps that you can go through and get results, but that's kind of a trick
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that I think people who teach art have kind of come up with to get you sufficiently engaged to do the real work, which is you got to just kind of do it and
Yeah.
practice at it and
Mm-hmm.
play at it and
But
screw it
isn't
up and
that
have
such a sad thing that, some teachers think they've got to teach a sequence so that you feel enough mastery so that you don't leave, so that you keep at it. And that's what I love about your message, because it's more discovery based, and honor the process and let it unfold.
right. But we want results. We want to
Yeah.
say, like, tell me exactly how to do this. We want it to be like putting together a piece of IKEA furniture that you go through all the steps and you end up with a bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's kind of like, if you want to play tennis, you can you can't really read a book about how to do it.
Right.
And if you want to run a marathon, you can certainly read a book or a magazine about it, but it's not really going to get you to do it. So this is the same kind of thing.
Hmm.
This drawing is even more interesting because on one level it's a physical activity, as I said, using the tiny muscles in your fingers and your eyeballs. It's a physical thing that you're training yourself to do, but it's also so much of a mental thing too.
Oh my
And there's
gosh.
so many this, like my wife is really into tennis, and we watch tennis matches sometimes, and I'll say, I don't understand. Like, you know, Nadal has been playing tennis since he was like 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that he can't serve perfectly every time? I don't get it. She'll get really irritated at me at that, and she'll say, because there's a million other factors. I'm like, yeah, but he's played professionally. He's played on TV. He should know how to do this every time. It's
Mm.
crazy that most of the time he's not getting it right. And I think that we have the same feeling about drawing. It's like, well,
Hmm.
you should know how to do this. And it's like,
Yeah.
no. What makes it so rich is that it really is involving every aspect of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
right? It's like our memories and our senses and our emotions. All these things are going into it. It's
Hmm.
not a mechanical activity like putting together a bookshelf. It's an extension of who you are
Yeah.
and who you are right now at this moment. All those things make it so interesting, and to to make it even more complicated, we also have a part of us that's trying to stop us from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, like, you don't know how to do
Hmm.
this. You're no good at this. Look, you made a mistake.
Right.
It's not turning out the way you
Yes.
thought. So it's really, really a complex thing. So you can't just watch a 5-minute video and know how to do it.
Yeah.
No, and not to like beat the monkey dead, but I think, even for this old girl, getting in touch with what your monkey's doing, and how you're being inhibited. I thought I knew, but in reading your book, I think I need to challenge myself a little bit about, the ways that those voices kind of appear. And it's what you said. It's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's our history. It's what someone said to you 5 seconds ago. It's what you're going to do in 5 minutes, but it's a swirl. But I think
Mm-hmm.
taking command over that and then feeling that kind of urgency to create because it's good for you. It's a worthwhile endeavor. Get in touch with your monkey. Hmm.
Yeah, it's hard because you. I call the book "Shut Your Monkey," but I didn't call it "Kill Your Monkey" because I think
Right.
in the end, your monkey is still kind of part of who you are. And
Hmm.
when you're making stuff and when you have ideas and you're inspired, it's related to this psychology that maybe is inhibiting you too. So
Hmm.
you can't completely. There isn't like a one, and that was the struggle I had in writing this book and in researching it was that every book I would read about the subject of the inner critic never had the definitive answer. And it's really, and you can even find the definitive answer, but then it can elude you after a while.
Mm-hmm.
You can say,
Yeah.
like, I know exactly, like, just don't stop being depressed, snap
Sure.
out of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, you can have a great day and you can feel like completely in command and on top of it and gentle with yourself and all those things. And then the next day something happens and it can slip away from you. It's an
Right.
ongoing practice that you have
Mhm.
to continue to struggle with. That's why people go to shrinks every week for years. It's not like an answer. Here it is,
Right.
5 steps to being healthy.
Right.
It's an ongoing process. And ultimately it's difficult to tell people that because like, oh, this guy's going to, you know, chew my ear off for a week telling me how to solve this. And then he is telling me that he probably won't solve it. But that's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the truth. And so, but also my history in advertising says you don't necessarily tell people the whole truth right away, particularly if you want to sell them on something.
Yeah.
You have to beguile them a bit and you have to make a
Yeah.
promise, which isn't to say it's dishonest, but it's only part of the story,
Yeah.
Yeah.
only
You
30
know,
seconds. So
Yeah.
my
A little bit of
9-year-old daughter
withholding.
likes to draw cute food.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
she kind of
oh,
falls in love with her cute food and tells stories about it. And I
Hmm.
love that.
love that sort of innocence of that process where you can not only draw, but you can fall in love with it. You can tell
Yeah.
your story, you can tell its story. Um,
Yeah. That's
I
so
wish she
good.
That's
would
right.
eat the cute food more often because she doesn't eat very often, but
Yes, it's true. I mean, you
Yeah.
think about the Mona Lisa, right? The Mona
Mhm.
Lisa, Da Vinci owned the Mona Lisa,
Mm,
and supposedly he kept like working on it like throughout his life.
mm,
And it was originally a commission that somebody else gave him, but he fell in love with this thing that he had made.
mm,
And that's part of what its power is, I think. It's his love for it is like we all
mm.
kind of feel something going on there. But I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I mean, what's the Greek myth about that of that My Fair Lady is based on?
Mm,
Oh,
Can't
mhm.
think of it right now.
Right.
Starts with a
Pygmalion?
P.
Pygmalion.
Pygmalion. There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so you fall in love with your creation. You create something, you
Yeah.
fall
Yeah.
in love with it. How great that is. And that to me is, I mean, it happens to me quite often. I'll do a drawing and I'll go, wow, I can't believe that I made that.
Hmm.
You know, there are the
Yeah.
times where I go, wow, I can't believe I made that. But
Works both ways.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Well, we are so grateful to you for coming on and
Yes.
making this podcast, which was just, I mean, it's so good. I love your process, your philosophy, the dose of perspective, and of course your daily dose of creativity.
Yeah.
yes, good. Well, thanks so much. This conversation kind of went all over the place. I'm sorry if I
No, it's
was
perfect.
drove off the road, but yeah, but that's how I'm in my garage.
Bring it full
Yeah,
circle with the car. I love it. It's so
Yeah.
good.
No,
Thank,
grateful. Thank you,
yes.
Danny.
Thanks,
you
Danny.
bet.